Their matchstick versus Australia in Adelaide was planned for a 7:30 p.m. boot away, almost 2 weeks following the begin of Ramadan in 2017. Win would include all but confident them a location at Russia 2018, but a tight 3-2 destruction provided a nervous skill campaigning would go downward to the definitive device 3 months after, in Saudi Arabia tightly beaten Japan to complete other front of Australia just on purpose distinction. Roel Koemans, air conditioning trainer to later Saudi Arabia officer Bert van Marwijk, believes how destruction to Australia was due to the effects of his players' post. Yet you just put petrol in for 50 km and later you yet wait how you will get to how place. And later they understood he. Saudi Arabia begun the matchstick so, 2 times upcoming of over to go in part-time standard. In the other part, yet, their productivity omitted and Australia scored the winner purpose following 64 protocol. In sundown in Adelaide quickly following 5 p.m. in June, the team, negative the 4 persons players who chose to not watch Ramadan at how period, were just capable to include their at first food of the day on 3 several hours up beginning. While thou'ri in a top kind of sports you will do all how influences yours productivity and I believe food is one of the largest key points for restoration, Koemans explains. Yet as well yours power standard and if you include low power consumption, which do you wait? The flesh has quite for on 45 protocol to in time and how was precisely which we saw in our amateur performance. Following in time we had a breakdown downward. We had just 4 persons players who were consuming for the entire 1 week. In spite creature incapable to eat for light several hours through Ramadan, Koemans says learning sessions initially weren't in question in how world box. Since of the previous sunset in the Australia winter, Van Marwijk and Koemans organized learning for the players in the night following they had break quick at sundown. Yet, as the 1 week wore on, the players, incapable to support their power levels, instead of had to save themselves for the matchstick after how 1 week. It was more than of a issue how you don't restore so in the days following learning, Koemans explains. Later they eat but up the following learning they don't include quite gas in their flesh and how tool they win restore for the following learning meeting and the following meeting will be less than intensive. Later following 7 or 8 days down there was a matchstick and you don't include quite store. Dinosaur Mamria, a ex-Tunisia vocational football player who observable Ramadan in his game days, agrees in Koemans. The 47-year-old, now a officer in England, says he wouldn't include suggested the Saudi Arabia players quick in the conduct up to the Planet Cup and doesn't believe 48 several hours is quite period to refuel quite. Which they can do is boat train at overnight period, but he's yet not ideally to be post and game soccer or making any sport occasion. He's not ideally. In spite all, you wish yours players to make their top soccer, you can do both of, particularly in an occasion love the Planet Bowl. Knowledge how essential the sacred monthly is to Muslim, at the foreground of Koemans' reason through the world breakdown was creature polite to his players' beliefs, time as well hard to support their natural so being to the highest standard probable. Usually, Muslim who journey for Ramadan are exempted of post as length as they do up the days after. We had a lot of questions up, Koemans told of his at first expertise training a Muslim domestic crew. The CEO, of Saudi Arabia's Soccer Federation, came and told, I will give an imam in and he will explanation to players, don't worry about their departure to take. Later while we were in Australia, down there wasn't an imam and one day no was at dinner, just 4 persons players were down there, 2 who were start, this matchstick. It was an extraordinary position for us but the trainer told, I'm not departure to strength them to take, he's their religious, I wish to be polite. In their at first play at Russia 2018, Saudi Arabia bring down to a inclusive 5-0 destruction to hosts Russia, the just nationality in the contest ranged under them, in which was a frustrating productivity. Saudi Arabia's Soccer Federation wasn't once accessible for commentary while requested on their Planet Cup preparations for Ramadan. The scientific sports scholar Dr. Craig Duncan, who is now Koemans Fellow in the Australia domestic crew, believes sleeping acting the largest urgent part in help post players restore. Incapable to fill their power supplies in meal and sip, otherwise begins to include and though more than essential portion in eking out each probable ounce of power. He's a really essential period culturally and you include to honor how, he says. Yet, it is necessary to be controlled really thoroughly of a physiologic prospect so the culture beliefs can be undertaken in expense and respectable but as well try and get maximal productivity out of he. Thou include to supervise the sleeping and do certainly how you maximize how and use the day to enable them to include naps since down there is no question the tiredness increases since of the lack of the regular loop of consuming. They would later boat train for a pair of several hours, up consuming a big food to restore completely. Else less food would be corroded about 1 m. And the players would ultimately go to sleeping about rising sun. This big item is for them to sleeping really so. The trend is for them to go to sleeping deceased and to get in a hard loop so we'd fare very supervise how, Duncan says. If thou ve got a crew how is all practitioner or the most of them later it becomes a slight bit facilitating since you can supervise learning about the consumption of meal so it becomes partly facilitating. I'd very attention on the sleeping, the learning period and I believe it can be made but he's not lightweight. He's greater rather than soccer isn't he? Saudi Arabia outdoor the Planet Cup versus hosts Russia Thursday Eid al-Fitr, the sectarian feast that celebrates the end of Ramadan, is forecasted to drop the day following, the identical day Egypt, Morocco and Iran outdoor their Planet Cup campaigns. Tunisia, else Muslim majority nation, Nigeria and an army of some Muslim players who act for Europe countries will act there at first matches in the next days. The day is frequently famous carefully, in families and friends frequently dividing big quantities of meal. Yet, the length-term effects of post for a monthly cannot be uncompensated for in fair 24 several hours of routine meal intake. I quickly carried out you can't be at yours top if you don't gas yours flesh, Mamria adds. Receive educated man, now I understand he's not probable to do both of, following Ramadan, yours flesh will get a few days to regulate behind to consuming once again. He's really hard to act games as essential as a Planet Cup specifier or a Planet Cup play in players who are post and include not corroded or had whatever to sip for 24 several hours. The gamer Mamria, now making his administrative stripes at Stevenage FC in England's 4 level, recalls the natural upheaval of hard to go on monitoring Ramadan while he leftward Tunisia for England. In matches for Ramadan in his home league planned for 10 p.m., he says the natural effects of post were negated quite to yet be capable to execute at a top standard. So apparently how struck me and I got to understand how if I wish to offer my soccer career all in, I've got to victim Ramadan learnedly. I understand currently, following all the teaching, you can't. In fact he's really essential to gas yours flesh. Food in soccer and in kind of sports in general is enormous if you wish to surpass in which you make. In England, soccer clubs tend to boat train one day in the night, up take a break down for dinner and learning once again in the afternoon, occasionally in dual sessions. Time his teammates would refuel at dinner, Mamria was incapable to include whatever to eat or sip before sundown. Matches as so, normally a 3 o'clock boot away, you can't not eat or sip all day and later begin a play at 3 o'clock and wait to be at yours top, he says. As Tunisia is a Muslim majority nation and the National League's rescheduled fixtures and learning to contain Ramadan, Mamria never felt how monitoring a monthly of post impacted him constructively down there. Apparently down there is no take benefit of it since all is making the identical, he says of his household nationality. Yet in England it was certainly a inconvenience for me. If I'm game versus players how are powerful, game difficult and fueling their bodies through the 1 week and I'm poor out of any liquid in my flesh, of year I'm not departure to respond fast quite, of year I'm not departure to be at my sharpest. But Mamria is so aware of the psychological force of elitists athletes who select to quick for Ramadan, individually knowledge the force and devotion it conducted, and believes it can conduct them via I believe on the psychological party. It drives you to be much stronger, he says. It conducted a lot of courage to quick and a lot of faith in which thou remaking.